What I'm about to share is Judge Frank Caprio's final case before his passing, and it stands as one of the most remarkable courtroom moments ever captured. An 84-year-old homeless veteran appears in court, charged with stealing a loaf of bread. But when Judge Caprio learns what this man has been carrying in his shopping cart for 2 decades, he halts the proceedings and makes a decision that moves everyone to tears. This story will deeply touch you. When Judge Caprio discovers what's inside that cart, he takes an action so unexpected that it redefines courtroom history. But before we uncover this unforgettable moment, less than 1% of viewers watching are subscribed. Please take a second to subscribe, because this story of one of the most compassionate judges in history deserves to be heard by all. This isn't just another case. It's Judge Frank Caprio's legacy, his final act of humanity. What unfolds over the next 30 minutes will renew your belief in kindness, fairness, and the true meaning of compassion. It's a clear October morning at the Providence Municipal Court. Judge Frank Caprio, 84, is preparing for what would unknowingly become his last week on the bench. Over decades, he has presided over thousands of cases with empathy and integrity, earning admiration across the globe. The courtroom is filled, as always, and defendants, families, court staff, and even visitors from other states who came just to witness his trademark compassion firsthand. There's an unspoken feeling in the air, anticipation that something meaningful is about to occur. At precisely 10:30 a.m., the bailiff announces the morning's final case, a simple shoplifting charge on paper. Yet, as we'll soon see, nothing about it is ordinary. Through the courtroom doors walks an elderly man, 84 years old, named Edward Eddie Sullivan. Eddie moves slowly and carefully, leaning on a makeshift cane crafted from a tree branch. His layered, patched clothing tells the story of a man who has endured hardship for years. Yet what truly draws attention isn't Eddie himself, but what he's dragging behind him. An old shopping cart draped with a blue tarp, filled with what seems to be all he owns. Eddie is here because 3 days ago, he was caught taking a loaf of bread from a corner store without paying. The store manager called the police, and now Eddie faces a shoplifting charge that could lead to jail time. But before we get to the remarkable discovery Judge Caprio is about to make, I want to ask you something. Tell me in the comments where you're watching this from. Whether it's Chicago, London, Sydney, or Miami, drop your city below. Because Judge Caprio's message of compassion deserves to be heard across the world. As Eddie reaches the defendant's stand, Judge Caprio immediately observes something many might overlook. Despite Eddie's poverty and rough appearance, he carries himself with quiet dignity. He removes his faded baseball cap out of respect, stands as upright as his frail body allows, and meets the judge's eyes directly. Edward Patrick Sullivan, the court clerk, reads from the docket. Eddie steps forward, holding his cane tightly in one hand and his shopping cart handle in the other, guarding it as though it contains something deeply valuable. Judge Caprio glances up from his papers, his kind eyes, famous for decades of compassion, meeting Eddie's. Instantly, he realizes this isn't just a simple shoplifting case. Mr. Sullivan, Judge Caprio begins, you're charged with shoplifting, a loaf of bread worth $2.49 from Murphy's Corner Store. How do you plead? The judge asks calmly. Guilty, Your Honor, Eddie replies quietly, his tone carrying the weight of a life marked by hardship. I took the bread. I was hungry. Judge Caprio sets his pen down, a gesture that signals he's moving past the formality of the law and into something more personal. Mr. Sullivan, can you tell me about your situation? Why couldn't you afford the bread? Eddie glances around the crowded courtroom before turning back to the judge. Your Honor, I've been homeless for 8 years. I live on the streets, pick up work when I can, but at my age, jobs are nearly impossible to find. Judge Caprio's expression softens further. Mr. Sullivan, may I ask your age? 84, Your Honor. Same as you, I believe. The words catch the judge off guard. 2 men, both 84, born the same year, yet their paths could not be more different. One a respected judge, the other a homeless man struggling to survive. Indeed, we are the same age, Mr. Sullivan, the judge says thoughtfully. Tell me, did you serve in the military? Eddie straightens his posture slightly. Yes, Your Honor, proudly. U.S. Army, Korea from 1952 to 1954, and Vietnam from 1968 to 1970. 2 tours. And if this moment already feels heavy, an 84-year-old homeless veteran, the same age as Judge Caprio stealing bread to stay alive, consider liking this video. Stories like this highlight both the flaws and compassion within our system, and your support helps them reach more people. Judge Caprio rises from the bench, a familiar gesture when he's moved by someone's story. He steps down, closing the distance between himself and the defendant. "Mr. Sullivan, Eddie," he says gently. "You served in 2 wars?" "Yes, Your Honor. I was 19 when I went to Korea. Came back thinking I'd seen the end of war. Then Vietnam broke out and we were called back into service." Judge Caprio notices that Eddie keeps one protective hand on his shopping cart throughout their conversation. "Eddie, I have to ask, what's in the cart?" Eddie's expression shifts immediately. His grip on the handle tightens, and for the first time he looks genuinely uneasy. "Your Honor, it's personal belongings. Nothing illegal, just things that mean a lot to me." Judge Caprio, relying on years of experience reading people, senses that there's more behind Eddie's hesitation. "Eddie, would you feel comfortable showing me what's inside? I'm not asking as a judge right now, but as a person who cares about your story." Eddie glances around the courtroom filled with more than 40 onlookers. His hand trembles slightly as he weighs the request. "Your Honor, people might think I've lost it when they see what's here." "Eddie," Judge Caprio replies gently, "I've sat on this bench for 30 years. I've seen it all, and I've never thought anyone was crazy for holding on to something meaningful. Please go ahead." Eddie takes a slow breath and pulls back the blue tarp covering his cart. The courtroom goes silent as the contents are revealed. Hundreds of photographs, letters, military papers, dog tags, a Purple Heart, campaign ribbons, and a neatly kept military journal. But what truly shocks everyone is what comes next. As Eddie carefully lifts a stack of photos, Judge Caprio's eyes widen. "Eddie, are these—" "Yes, Your Honor," he interrupts softly. "Every soldier from my units who never made it home. Korea and Vietnam. I've carried their photos and their stories for more than 70 years. The room falls completely silent. Eddie continues to lift each photograph one by one. Black and white images from Korea, color photographs from Vietnam. Young faces, many barely adults, stare into the camera with a mix of courage and hesitation, the expression shared by soldiers about to enter battle. This is Private Tommy Chen from San Francisco, just 19 when he lost his life at the Chosin Reservoir. He often showed me photos of his little sister and talked about teaching her how to drive once he returned home. Judge Caprio leans in closer as Eddie continues to pull out more photos and papers. "This is Sergeant Mike Rodriguez from El Paso," he says. "He was engaged to his high school sweetheart, wrote her a letter every day while we were in Korea. He died saving 3 wounded soldiers, carrying them to safety." Eddie's voice begins to waver as he holds up another photo. "And this is Lieutenant James Morrison from Maine, 22 years old. He saved my life in Vietnam by diving on a grenade. The last thing he said was, 'Tell my mom I died thinking about her apple pie.'" As Eddie shares more photos and memories, quiet sobs fill the courtroom. These aren't just old images. They're a living memorial preserved by a man determined never to let his fallen brothers fade from memory. "Your Honor," Eddie says softly, "I know people see me as just an old homeless man with a cart of junk. But these men, they deserve to be remembered. Their families deserve to know someone still carries their stories." Judge Caprio's eyes well up, realizing the depth of Eddie's lifelong mission. "Eddie," the judge asks gently, "how many soldiers' stories are you carrying?" 437, Your Honor," Eddie replies. "Every name, every face, every story I can recall. I have their letters, their medals, and the personal belongings their families never came for. I've been their guardian for 70 years. But Eddie isn't done yet." He reaches deep into his cart and pulls out a worn notebook, its corners tattered from decades of use. "This is their record, Your Honor," he says. "Every story I could find, every detail about their lives and deaths. I've been adding to it for 70 years, each time I learned something new about one of my boys." Judge Caprio accepts the notebook with care, turning the pages slowly. His face shifts from interest to admiration, then to something close to reverence. "Eddie, this is remarkable," the judge says softly. "You've built one of the most complete memorials to forgotten heroes I've ever encountered." But as he continues reading, he suddenly stops. "Eddie, it says here you've been locating the families of fallen soldiers and returning their belongings. How many have you found?" "Over 200, Your Honor," Eddie replies. Sometimes it takes years, but I find them. I bring them their son's last letter, his medal, or a photo he carried. I tell them how brave he was, how much he was loved by his brothers. Judge Caprio realizes he's speaking to a man who's dedicated 70 years to honoring the fallen and comforting their families while living in hardship himself. Eddie, you've been homeless for 8 years? Yes, sir, Eddie nods. Lost my apartment when my VA benefits were cut because of a paperwork mistake. Been on the streets ever since. But I always keep the cart with me. These boys still need someone to look after them. And I have to pause here, because what you're seeing is one of the purest examples of service and remembrance that exists. If you haven't subscribed yet, please click that button now. Stories like Eddie's remind us of what true heroism means, and your support allows us to continue sharing these powerful human stories with the world. Sadly, Judge Frank Caprio passed away just 2 weeks after Eddie's case, making it his final act of kindness on the bench. What a remarkable conclusion to a lifetime devoted to serving others. Judge Caprio's family shared that Eddie's case reflected everything their father stood for, that every person deserves respect, that helping others is life's greatest purpose, and that compassion has the power to change lives. During Judge Caprio's funeral, Eddie Sullivan was given a seat of honor in the front row. He carried a photo of the judge and placed it in his memorial collection. Judge Caprio saved my life and honored my sons, Eddie said to those gathered. Now he's part of the memorial too, and now, I'd like to ask something that Judge Caprio himself would have wanted. In the comments below, tell us about someone in your life who deserves recognition for their quiet service to others. Who are the unseen heroes in your community? The ones making a difference without expecting gratitude? Judge Frank Caprio spent 3 decades showing us that compassion is a conscious choice we make each day. Eddie Sullivan spent 70 years proving that love and remembrance can endure even the hardest times. Share your stories in the comments, because Judge Caprio's legacy continues in every act of kindness, every gesture of empathy, and every moment when we choose to see the humanity in others. If this story touched your heart, if Judge Caprio's final act of compassion and Eddie's lifelong devotion inspired you, please share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes still walk among us. Like this video if you believe in honoring veterans, supporting the homeless, and treating every person with dignity and respect. Subscribe for more stories that continue Judge Caprio's message, that compassion, kindness, and decency will always overcome indifference. And remember Judge Caprio's words, justice is not only about the law, it's about seeing the person behind the case and responding with your heart. Rest in peace, Judge Frank Caprio. Your compassion truly changed the world one case at a time.